Hello everyone, please silence your cell phones. This program is 6 weeks in the park. We have Dr. Brian Railsback. He is a professor of English at Western Carolina University and has published works in fiction and nonfiction. He is an internationally recognized John Steinbeck scholar and has given lectures or taught classes in 10 countries. So please help me welcome Dr. Railsback.
Boogertown Gap is a hard act to follow. Thank you all for coming. We started a little late, but we're going to be fine. I teach at Western. I am used to working with college students, and I know it's deadly to get between an audience and its dinner. So we will get done at 5:30 or close to. Also, to be honest, I thought maybe there would be a dozen people here, so I'm delighted and surprised, and I'm on the board at Smokies Life, and so I hustled out there and got a whole bunch more free copies, so we have as many as we have in the building. So afterwards, if you're interested, this is the copy of the journal, Smokies Life Journal, and these essays in their finished form about my time in the park are published in here with photographs. So, what happened? How did I wind up out there? I applied for and was accepted for the 2023 Steve Kemp Writer-in-Residence in the Great Smokies National Park. Why did I want to do that, aside from the fact that it was 6 weeks in the park? I had come up with an idea at a famous, I read a little bit from it at a famous writers conference called Breadloaf in 2022. And my idea was a novel about a man named Peter Quin, who gets himself in trouble. He finds himself in an illegal bear hunt, not of his own making, but a friend sort of lulls him into it, and is involved in a really terrible incident where he witnesses his buddy kill a sow and harvest from it, and Peter is a borderline alcoholic, and he doesn't handle the situation very well. And he, by this time, is quite drunk. So he tells his friend, you take whatever you need away. I'm just going to go off in the woods and hide out for a while and try to get my head, and just come pick me up the next morning. And that's the plan. His friend is also drunk, but that's the plan that they work out. He's also escaping from his wife, Elsie, who doesn't really approve of this. He is a failed academic, unemployed, and so off he goes. Next morning, he wakes up and he finds that he's been turned into a black bear. No explanation, and the wreckage of his clothes, everything is scattered about. And he also finds that he is slowly but surely over time becoming more and more bear-like. And as he's becoming much more attuned to the world around him. Not just in terms of how he can hear or smell, but also he really begins to understand that nature is really a sort of magical world that we're, as human beings, just really kind of cut off from. So throughout the novel, he is dealing with losing his humanity while he becomes more bear-like. He adopts the cub of the female bear that was shot, her single cub. He thinks that he adopts her, but really the cub knows a whole lot more about what's going on than he does, and eventually the relationship changes, and off he goes. And he has this idea that he's going to, the one thing he can do, having been a witness to what he witnessed the night before, the one thing he can do is, if he can remember how to get there and how it works, he can get this cub into the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and at least in a way redeem himself. That's his plan. Along the way, lots of things happen. Now, his wife, Elsie, is alerted that he's gone. They search for him, and what they find are the torn up, shredded remains of his clothing. His camp is obliterated. There is definitely evidence of a very large black bear being there, and she becomes obsessed with the idea that the bear that he has in fact become is the bear that killed her husband. Despite experts who really find a lot of question to it, she is going to get closure and she's going to get that bear, so she hires a tracker from Montana to track down her husband and shoot him. And so lots of problems ensue. And so why was I in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park? The book I'm talking about is, the novel I'm working on is obviously fantastic, but I wanted it grounded in reality as much as it possibly could be. So I wanted to be in a place where I could observe bear behavior. And this residency at the national park allowed that. Furthermore, it allowed me to interview an incredible array of black bear experts. And I read a lot, and I did everything I could to understand how their behavior worked and how things went. So, and if we have time, I might read at the end here just a little bit from this work. I'm tinkering with the language, but this novel's almost done. It's called Peter Quince Becomes a Bear. But along the way, living with my wife for 6 weeks in the national park. We were right at Cades Cove, and they put us up in a little apartment back there for law enforcement agents. I had this fantasy that I would be roughing it, and then I would go out way deep into the wilderness and find the bears, and the experts would help me find them. Boy, was I wrong. The Cades Cove has the highest concentration in the summer, has the highest concentration of bears and human beings of anywhere in the world. About 2,000 bears, of course, thousands and thousands of human beings. And so every day, at least once if not twice a day, I would hop on my mountain bike and I would just ride that loop. And every day I saw, I think the best, I counted 5 different bears sightings in one loop trip. And I watched bears every day and it was fascinating. But what I also watched were human beings. And so now a side project that was not intended was I just felt like there was so much I was learning from this experience that had nothing to do with my novel, that I wrote a series of blogs. And the series of blogs that was for Smokies Life, the organization. They decided that they wanted to round them up and put them in the copy of the journal that I have here. So what I'm going to do is read you some of these essays, and then if there's a little time, I'll read you a little bit from the book, and then I'll be, of course, happy to answer any questions, and we'll get going. This first observation is called, it was the second one thrown out there, and it's called Camp Walks. And by the way, I was there from June 22nd to August 4. At this Great Smoky Mountains National Park apartment that I live in, dusk is a time for camp walks. The stream of cars leaving Cades Cove Loop thins out. As the sun sets, the humid summer heat evaporates and the fireflies rise from the shrubs and grasses. The air fills with the inviting smell of campfires. I stroll by the string of blue-purple LED lights around Wayne Corey's camper. He's one of the volunteer camp hosts who help people understand how the place operates, answers countless questions, and occasionally shoos away bears. Who knows what time he'll get back from his duties tonight. I step onto the camp road and into a transient village filled with marvelous inventions of the 21st century. Land cruisers with all the amenities, simpler RVs, micro campers, and the miraculous pop-up tents perched on top of vehicles. Strings of amber lights, welcome flags, and small portable solar farms abound. For all modern gadgetry on display, the campground feels like a neighborhood from a half a century ago. Out in the narrow lanes, kids play pickup softball or touch football games or run foot races. By the light of a campfire, a woman reads a book. A family laughs over a board game. Everywhere people talk with each other, dusting off old family stories or sharing new tales of the day's wilderness adventures. A great extended family from India, several generations represented, sits on 20 folding chairs arrayed in a vast semicircle. They carry on a multi-layered conversation in a language I don't understand. I hang back for a moment in the twilight shadow, wishing I could join them. I rarely see a device or a screen or the normally ubiquitous cell phone. These things seem dead here. It's fascinating to see how people come alive as a result. The road is almost dark, and here comes an excited man to warn my wife and I that a black bear has been sighted nearby. He rushes on to tell others. I am learning that nothing energizes people around here like a bear. I hope for the animal's sake that it has safely ambled off into the woods. We come upon a mob of kids, at least a half dozen of them, ages 9 to 13. They've been tearing around the camp on their bicycles, playing a wild game of hide and seek. Here they pause briefly to go over how the rules change with the coming dark. They don't have lights, so I imagine that they'll have to ride by the glow of campfires. I tell the pack that a bear might be prowling around the edges of camp. A bear. A wide-eyed 10-year-old boy with a patch of long blonde hair looks around. 13-year-old girl gets in position to go, her leg flexing on the pedals. They all gather around as I answer questions about the bear. My cautions go into thin air, and off they go. They search, they screech and holler at each other with glee because now the game has become hide and seek with a bear. I hope not. Yet I may as well be back in my old neighborhood in LA in the 1960s, for these kids have reacted to a bear sighting exactly as my old street gang would have back then. They ride on, abandoning all logic and fear, navigating by the wild stars of their imaginations. These are my heroes. In 1836, Ralph Waldo Emerson published Nature, a little book that became a blueprint for the romantic impulse that still lives in the USA today. His chapters enumerate the benefits of nature to one's health, imagination, virtue, and soul. Emerson encouraged people to leave their toxic cities and hard-bitten professions to discover the natural world. In the woods is perpetual youth, he writes, and it is there that we return to reason and faith. So, no matter what the weather, I walk the campground in Cades Cove. Magic happens there every evening. People come from many miles for a few days in a fleeting neighborhood where the AI is switched off, devices go dark, and faces are lit by the light of the ancient wood fire. I know we've come here for the grand mountains and the forests and the brief encounters with wildlife. But walking the camps, we seek something just as vital. We are here to escape the filtered view through electrified screens. We come to encounter each other face to face. Okay, that's the camp. This next essay is Stumpy Erim, which means Stumpy will have his revenge. Well, you'll understand who Stumpy is in a minute. I quietly stand in a corner of the main room of the Dan Lawson house on a hot afternoon in July, watching 4 barn swallow chicks pop their heads up from a mud nest tucked between the wall and ceiling. I come every day to observe their mothers swoop in and out to feed them when human groups are not there. It is a great testimony to the house visitors, hundreds walking through every day, that no one disturbs this nest. One day I will find the last of the chicks is flown and the mother is gone, her exhausting mission accomplished. One middle-aged fellow glances at the nest as he walks by. Barn swallows, he says. They are nasty pests. I don't know much about barn swallows, so later I look them up and learn they're considered pest birds, capable of spreading disease, damaging property, and even depressing real estate value. Our habit as Homo sapiens is to kill or remove nuisance species, and for countless reasons, many organisms on our planet make our pest list. Or even worse, they make the desirable list, and we harvest them sometimes until none are left. Elizabeth Colbert's best-selling book, The Sixth Extinction, made headlines with shocking premise that we are the cause of the latest global contraction of species, of numbers and diversity, now happening at frightening speed. She catalogs the ways, even before recorded history, that humans have dealt with species that threaten, annoy, or entice. We destroy habitat, we bring invasive species, blunt animal travel or communication, overharvest, and cultivate useful species over nuisance ones, sheep over wolves, for example. But Colbert's book and others like it tend to leave us at the curb. She concludes her study with a grim prediction. The sixth extinction will continue to determine the course of life long after everything people have written and painted and built has been ground into dust, and giant rats have, or have not, inherited the earth. What can we do? One of the many important efforts in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park is Discover Life in America. Its mission is to learn about over 60,000 organisms in the park, passing along that information to fulfill its vision of biodiversity being conserved through an engaged community. The more we understand the species in the park, the more likely we will want to preserve them. As Todd Witcher, executive director of the organization, says, you can't protect something if you don't know it exists. I'm cheered by organizations such as Discover Life in America, but for years I wondered, what could I do? My wife and I found an answer in 2016 when we decided to convert our 3 acres into a certified wildlife habitat through the National Wildlife Federation. Among other things, we drastically reduced mowing and weed eating, quit pesticides, and decided not to adopt new dogs and cats after our old ones passed away. In a few years, the woods replaced our banks and lawns with fields of wildflowers and berry bushes. Bees and butterflies moved in, along with birds we had not seen before, such as breasted grosbeaks, chipmunks, rabbits, turkeys, deer, and a lot more snakes. I'm going to pause for a moment. This is when your great environmental ideas can really backfire. Timber rattlers began to move onto the property, and I read up on them. It turns out they're really fairly passive, and so we learned how to deal with that, and that was fine. Unfortunately, ringneck snakes, if you know those, they're small little snakes, black mostly with a little ring around the neck. They decided that our house was pretty darn inviting, and they decided to move in. First it was a few, then it was more, and by the second summer we counted, we had removed 33 snakes inside the house. So that second summer when the invasion really began, I woke up, went into the bathroom at 3 o'clock in the morning, and there in the shower, writhing around were about 9 or 10 snakes. Really don't want to talk about what in the world they were doing there, but they were having a great time. And I just looked at it, and I had this momentary thought, I could get my shotgun, and I just blow them away. And then I thought, it'll be a complete disaster. I can't grab them, I don't know what to do. It's 3 in the morning, I gotta go to work tomorrow. So I just turned out the light and closed the door, and I went back to bed. And I told my wife, I said, there are a whole bunch of snakes riding together in the shower. I can't really deal with it. I'm just telling you, don't go in the bathroom. So she did. We figured out a way to remove them later without killing them. So there have been some problems. Well, one spring on the property, a large male groundhog moved in. We named him Stumpy the Whistle Pig. He built an incredible warren of dens and tunnels over the 5 years he was there. We named this place he built, this incredible thing, Fort Stumpy. He had girlfriends, and together they raised chucklings. I once got into a whistling, really a chirping contest with one of them. After 20 minutes, I was exhausted and left the triumphant adolescent in his unending song. You can't win that game. He just kept looking at me, and he just more and more excited. But we were warned by friends that groundhogs could be pests. They were known to undermine building foundations. Last year, people moved into the house nearby, and one afternoon, I heard gunfire there. Stumpy and his latest girlfriend were shot down. Now the stumpy trails have faded away, the entrances to his home blazed with spiderwebs. I wonder what he and his kind added to the ecosystem here and what price we'll pay for their execution. But like so many things in nature, the answer will sneak up on us. One day, biking the loop road, vying for space among the line of cars, I saw that Hyatt Lane was closed. I biked around the gate, which by the way you're not supposed to do, to get this road in Cades Cove all to myself. About a half mile in, ahead of me to the left, the largest male black bear I'd seen in the park sat by the edge of the lane. I stopped. With the wind at my back, I arrogantly expected he'd smell me and move off. He looked at us down in the air, tracked my location, and started to amble my way. I slowly backed away, dropped down a hill out of his view, and fled. Then out of a tree in front of me, a cub dropped onto the ground. Another scurried up a bank. I was stuck. Inevitably, the mother bear climbed up on the road and headed in my direction. My bliss at having the road to myself transformed into sickening fear. I backed away, worried about the male bear behind me, but at last, the female turned and followed her cubs into the woods. I had ignored the closed gates, the obvious warning, to get the peace of nature I felt I deserved. I had no idea what was coming. My face reddened as I hurried back to the loop road. To those bears trying to enjoy the rare peace afforded by the closed lane, I was a nuisance animal. All right. I was so embarrassed that I couldn't tell the people at Smokies Life or anybody. I just kept that to myself for quite a while. This one's called The Story of the Bear. July 11th. I'm writing in a fever dream, words flying over the page as I reach the final paragraph of the novel I've come to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park to write. Movement outside my window. I look up and 15 feet from where I sit, a black bear paws at the ground near a tree. A young female I will come to know as Bear 1298. When I arrived at my apartment at Cades Cove, I imagined long hikes into the wilderness to observe bears. I had no idea a short hike or walk from my place would often take me to a bear. I've seen as many as 5 different in one day. At Cades Cove in summer, they seem to be everywhere. I had to wait for a while to get into my Fiat once because a bear was just hanging out there. But then finally he left and I was able to drive away. The fields and woods of the cove, rich with food, bring in the bears, perhaps as many as 2,000. And the bears there attract curious humans, certainly more than 2,000 on any day in the summer. Few places in the world put such high concentrations of bears and humans together. The difficult task of making this coexistence possible falls to park wildlife experts, rangers, and volunteers. And for an excellent memoir of this work, read Bear in the Backseat by Kim Delosier and Carolyn Jordan. Park wildlife biologist Brian Williamson's job gets tougher as the bear and human populations grow. Mother bears teach cubs to avoid people, but when someone feeds a bear or leaves food out or a bear happens upon an easy meal, say a bowl of dog food, that life-saving education fades. Being practical, a food-conditioned bear goes for the quick meal, which might be in a car or tent. And the owner of that car or tent may or may not be able to shoo the bear away. When it's bear versus human, Williamson says, the bear always loses. He and others working with him will dart a conflict bear, bring it to the wildlife building, study it, tattoo a number on the inside of the bear's lip, attach 2 ear tags, and sometimes a GPS tracking collar. The bear is known by its assigned number. Williamson will try everything to give the bear another chance. It will be put in a trap made from an old culvert and subjected to loud noises such as firecrackers and even tasing upon release. If the bear relearns to fear people, it has a much better chance for survival. The bear has the potential to be relocated to the farthest corner of the park or outside the park to national forest lands, but all too often it'll travel 30 or 40 miles and come right back. Bears have an incredible homing instinct, Williamson says. Many years ago, a conflict bear could be easily relocated outside the park to a remote area. With the expansion of human development and increase in bear population, that option becomes less desirable. There is no further or deeper into the woods, Williamson says. Relocating a bear outside the park requires a maze of authorizations and layers of state and federal bureaucracy. A relocated bear faces many adversities, including death by speeding vehicle, hunters, landowners. About 2/3 of the bears relocated outside the park are dead within 4 months, Williamson says. When no place is left for a habituated, food-conditioned bear that runs into people repeatedly, the bear will be darted, euthanized, and sometimes necropsied for study, an end that Williamson wants desperately to avoid. On July 12, the Smokies Bearwise Task Force meets in Gatlinburg on Zoom. Bearwise gathers park and state wildlife experts, area business people, community leaders, and concerned park partners to find ways to keep bears alive and people safe. During routine reports about bear activity, William introduces the group to Bear 1298 and turns his monitor toward the metal table in the park wildlife building where, darted, she sleeps. Typical for a female of 3 years, she weighs 70 pounds. Probably born in the park in 2021. By the time she reached approximately 18 months of age, her mother kicked her loose. In a park saturated with bears, finding her own home territory wasn't easy. Bear number 1298 discovered that the campground at Cades Cove provided a haven. Williamson believes that some animals seek human shielding by staying at a place with so many people that predators or territorial competitors avoid it. Bear 1298 becomes habituated to humans, but not food conditioned. She stays out of trouble. However, she cannot be left to wander the campground. On June 20, she is darted, taken to the building, and given her number. Relocated to a far end of the park at Tritt Cemetery. Nevertheless, she travels over 33 miles and returns to Cades Cove within 2 weeks. Williamson plans to dart her again, but a no-shoot order is issued for the park and he has to wait. The battery dies in her GPS collar on August 8, and Bear 1298 is gone. Bear 1298 navigates difficult terrain and times, as do those who work to keep her and her kind alive. I think of her often and hope she will thrive. In his haunting final collection of essays, Embrace Fearlessly the Burning World, the naturalist Barry Lopez writes of a black bear who often visited his remote Oregon home. When I go to sleep tonight, the bear will be out there in the woods somewhere, lifting his head to the night breeze. What am I to do if he turns up in my dreams? Now this is the last essay I'll read of the group. My days here are coming to an end, and that old human rooting instinct wants to hold me fast to what feels like home. Haunted by the idea of leaving, biking or hiking in the grooves of familiar paths, I wonder about the deeper truths here before it's too late, and I'm back in Cullowhee, watching Wheel of Fortune. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, Robert Frost wrote in his great poem, Mending Wall. I believe that something calls us to places like Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And I wonder if some visitors seek it when they come from afar to be here. One afternoon, in the bustling Cades Cove camp store parking lot, I see a great extended Amish family huddling near the vending machines. Like visitors from the 19th century, they look upon the scene with what I imagine would be a mix of weariness and bemusement. Perhaps they've come from as far as Pennsylvania or Ohio. Their van driver takes a break, alone in the cab, listening to rock music and smoking a cigarette. On a small patch of grass in the middle of Clingman's Dome parking lot sit 2 Buddhist monks, smiling, looking at the long horizon while vehicles in search of an empty space circle around. They remind me of the monks I saw years ago on a hike from one temple to another in the ancient city of Nara, Japan. But in their bright orange robes, they're most likely from some other country in Southeast Asia. I want to ask them where they're from, but I stop. They don't need my interrogation. Among Emerson's list of the environment's gifts, from material commodity to the ultimate one, spirit. He writes, "The aspect of nature is devout," adding that the happiest person is the one who learns from nature the lesson of worship. Of all the lessons in his book, this one resonates with me most. As an agnostic teenager, I found anything remotely spiritual to be uncomfortable. Even the concept of the Force in Star Wars bothered me. At 18, though, during a 2-week backpacking trip in the shadow of the jagged minarets of the Ritter Range in the Sierra Nevada mountains, my closed view was shattered. The gigantic beauty of those peaks and the perfection of the forest dwarfed me. It was an invitation to ponder the universe beyond measurable fact. Of course, Emerson's notion leaned on sources from all over the world, read voraciously. For his time, he had a profound interest in indigenous beliefs. A great survey of the great Native American literature of our country helps one to understand what I first glimpsed in the Sierras. One of my favorite novels, Ceremony by Liza Norman Silko, beautifully weaves the spiritual landscape of Laguna Pueblo in New Mexico to the healing of a broken war veteran. Another book, Tracks by Louise Erdrich, illustrates the folly of those exploiting the land in ignorance of Chippewa culture and spiritual belief. And in his wonderful collection of short stories, The Witch of Going Snake, Cherokee author Robert Conley writes, "The American Indian spirit world does not exist as a world apart from the real world. The world we inhabit in this life is both physical and spiritual. To Cherokee, as to other Indians, spirit life is an everyday reality." I hope Conley's belief, drawing from centuries of human wisdom, might extend to all of us. Our last Sunday morning here, we've come one more time to the Popup Church in the amphitheater behind the bike rental shop at the Cades Cove campground. A gathering of visitors come from a variety of Christian denominations. I look forward to the work of our ministers, 3 college women. On my writing and research leaves in 2023, I've missed students. Despite media claims of the snowflake generation, I've learned that many students today work hard to pay their way through, feel anxious about the country they've inherited, and search for ways to make a positive difference in the world. Our ministers, Abby Bennett from Florida Southern College, Olivia Kettner, and Riley Van Winkle, both from the University of Nebraska, make me feel at home. They bring devotion, enthusiasm, and humor to the services, and they're part of the organization, a Christian ministry in the national parks. I asked Bennett why she volunteered. Her explanation resonates with a book I read across many beliefs about the environment and spirit. She says, "When I'm in nature, I always feel closer to God. No matter what I'm dealing with in my personal life, when I enter the park each day, I am immediately reminded of God's love for me and the vastness of creation." I returned to Cades Cove for a bike ride in October, taking forever as I stopped to admire the wine smell of dead leaves and watch trembling colors of green, gold, and red. I'm back again in December, looking out at the bare tree limbs and fields of brown stubble. The air is still and cold, the forest silent, and I can't help but feel that there's something out there waiting to connect with anyone who's ready. Thank you. Okay, I probably shouldn't read from the novel. I may just take a few minutes and just see if you have any questions.
Did somebody turn the air down?
So, it feels good. It feels good. I'm waking up. There's nothing worse than teaching in a class where it's really hot and humid. We're all about ready to fall asleep. Yeah.
Could you make a good guess for, you have someone coming to visit and they say, we can only be there a week. What's the most likely to see a bear time of year?
Oh, definitely summer, spring and summer. A really awesome time, I lucked out, is June, when all the berries, May and June, when there are all the berries, they just come flocking in. And I was in Cades Cove for a full hour. And I thought, gosh, I wonder if I'll see a bear. And suddenly this this bear just went, I don't know why, tearing across this meadow as fast as possible. And at first I thought it was a big dog, and I realized, oh no, it's a bear. And it was like that all the time.
Okay.
So May, June is really good. But it continues, August, but by the time you get to September, the foraging is not as good, and then they begin to make their way to other places to get food. Acorns, especially.
Okay.
So what's your favorite spot at Cades Cove?
Ooh.
Ooh, wow. Favorite spot at Cades Cove? I really got to the point where I just loved all of it. But I can tell you, one spot is, if you get about halfway, there's a rise, and you can look back, and there's a really great view. That's one of my favorite spots. But as a biker, it got to be where the downhills are. Where you get to those places where it says, walk your bike. I was like, oh, this is gonna be great. And you just tear down. I can't really do that though when there are a lot of cars. But on Wednesday, in the summertime on Wednesday, there are no cars, and you can really just go for it. So the downhills. Uphills not as much, especially when there are a bunch of cars. There's nothing like chugging with your bike and just sort of chugging uphill and having all this exhaust blow right in your face. I did it though. I got to the point, much to the irritation of my wife, that I called it the dance with death. And I was weaving it around the trucks and cars, and I felt like I was back in LA. I got pretty good at it. Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
When do you expect the novel to be published? Do you have a date yet, or?
That's a really great question, because I keep tinkering with the language. I thought I was done, and I wound up, every time I read it, I keep fiddling with it. Some of you may know the author Ron Rash.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he said, I'm going to take credit here, I was the department head that was smart enough to hire that man. So we've been good friends for 20 years, and I asked him, when do you know that you finally finished something? Because this book has been driving me crazy. And he said, you know when you start correcting things and going back and uncorrecting them. So I'm not quite there yet, but I've got to be, this summer I've got to finally be done. I'll be done. Can't do much during the academic year.
I mean, he came out of the gate with, I think, with 1 foot in the evening, so I mean,
yeah.
grief, how do you, and got better. I mean, that's, what can you say
He's,
to that?
yeah, he's amazing. I think, okay, this is the last thing I'm going to do. Now I'm inspired. If I can find it, this is one of those things that, I'm just going to read a very short portion of this book, and then I'll be done. So, my main character, Peter Quin, as he becomes more and more bear-like, he finds out that they communicate. All these animals communicate. He sort of translates in his head to language, but it's really from sounds, movements, but also something else that we can't really detect scientifically, that the transcendentalists were right. They're all connected in a really interesting way. So he and this cub communicate, and by the time we get to this little bit in the novel, they've been at it for a while. Peter Quince encounters a female bear in heat and kind of loses himself, and never really goes there, but becomes interested, but then runs into a rival male, and Peter really is not equipped, does not know how to fight, and he just gets completely obliterated, and he escapes, but he's severely wounded, and so the cub is going to take him to a place that she knows about to try to fix him up, and so this is just that little moment, then we'll stop there. I refer to her as the yearling. The yearling stuffs herself, ready for the time when she must go to ground. She eats frantically. But he is Peter. He feels weak, working even now to focus on hunger. The wounds still hot on his neck and belly, all a barbed tangle that puts his mind out of tune. He paws at a nut, and she turns to him at last. Good, eat. I will. She comes to him, licking a gash on his shoulder, tasting the wound. After we're done here, you need to go to water. What? She sits back, looking at him, tilting her head. You don't know? What? He cracks an acorn in his teeth, one that has been in the damp ground too long and tastes sour. He has a strange feeling, like he wants to prove to her that he knows what a bear should be doing. Spits out the acorn cap. When you are as hurt as you are, you go to water. To water, he tries to seem wise. You hear an alien call. Someone is down there, and the cub stops. He shoves his head between a tree and a thick hedge of mountain laurel to get a look. Two people below, one in the water moving an extension of himself like an insect's long antenna, up and down, up and down. The bear leads the cub away, following the river, but far enough back to remain unseen as they go. They become two dark shadows, instinctively weaving through the understory, disappearing where the late afternoon sun cannot touch. The sound of the water changes, roaring, echoing against itself, and the bear finds a clear spot of sun by a steep, rocky bank. Looks around. Few people would come here, to a deep humming glen between walls of slanted granite without any trails. He starts in, his haunches higher than his head, as he struggles to keep from sliding down into the deep hole. The tension makes the wounds on his shoulder and belly sing. His pads glide onto a smooth dome of whetstone, and his weight and the cub slipping into him from behind plunges him into the water. The cub tumbles in behind, giving a loud grunt. She paddles along to come up beside him in the slow current, lapping up water as she goes, watching him with eyes that shine from the sunny white points of light at the surface. Happy. She slips ahead, and he keeps his head up, drifting into the deep pool, the water humped up now, smooth as it flows under a wall of shadow. The deep water slows and rippling, becoming the grays, browns, and blacks of the rocks below, then deeper still, the river bunching up, shafts of sunlight disappearing down into the depths. The cub swims ahead, clambers upon a bank of rock on the far end, shakes her fur from head to tail, countless drops flying off her this way and that, little halos of rainbows that come and go. She looks back his way, and he realizes there, as purely as the water he floats in, that she is beautiful. The cold seeps into his wounds and numbs them. She told him that he must stay in the water for as long as it takes, so he lets a back eddy ease him into the middle of the pool. The bear ducks his head beneath the surface, and he hears voices, or something like voices, what he remembers once from a time he swam across a river before. He tips his nose up and exhales, his great hulking body slowly sinking. Naturally buoyant, his shoulder, rump, and the ridge of his spine slip under slowly. Sinking, he hears a high trilling sound. He opens his eyes and sees minnows sheer away. Behind him, where the water rushes into the pool, banks of fingerling brown trout chirp as they angle for position to catch the insects that slide in. At intervals, a deeper tone shoots up out of the dark, a big brown or competing rainbow rushing to snatch larger fare. All of it is a blur to the bear as he slowly descends. Now in the colder, darker water, all feeling of his wounds disappear. He has no urgency to breathe yet, instead concentrating on what he hears. Punctuating the minnow and trout song are the screeching notes of the darters, the clicks and thumps of crawfish, and a deep pulse of the big fish at the bottom, the lumbering catfish and the surviving monster trout, both brown and rainbow, great lips ripped and torn, backs streaked with white scars. He hears something well up, a low cry like some kind of lament, and he sees the outline of huge shadowfish appearing and disappearing in the deep shafts of sunlight. So one thing I have to explain here is, in this world that he's immersed in, there's also no real boundary of time. So he sees shadows and ghosts of species that haven't existed in the mountains for a long time. And for a while he's confused, but he straightens it out. So now he's looking sort of at these ghost fish. But the sound does not come from the ghosts, but one remaining giant who swims with them, still alive. An ancient sturgeon among dead cousins, her scales lighting up like bits of mica. She cries up through the music of all living things in the pool, cutting through the joyful songs of eating, competing, fighting, loving, with an aria of loss and death. Then as sudden as the urgent need to breathe, the bear understands that the old sturgeon is singing to him. He buoys up to the surface, taking in great gulps of air, and paddles to the cub as she sits on her flat rock, and watches him. There is just enough room for two, and he leans on her a little to absorb what warmth he can. Together they watch the sunlight lift out of the glen until only the high rock wall remains dappled with gold. He no longer feels his wounds. It is amazing, he turns to her at last, his snout near her ear. What? She asks. What does he mean by amazing? It's hard for him to think that way. The water. They sing there. That's how the waters heal. She leaps from the rock to the steep shore, turning her back to him. Now let's find something to eat. Thank you. Okay, maybe one last question, because
Yeah.
it's 5:30 is nine, and I want to keep
I
you.
just wanted to see if you could tell us something about the other animals you saw while you were there.
Oh, yeah. I saw coyotes. Maybe the coolest thing was I was out and it was quiet. It was one of those Wednesdays when there weren't cars, and I'm riding along, and there were 5 coyote pups right by the road, and one of them was even venturing close to the road. So I'd been trained by my bear-wise folks, so I kind of backed away. There was another person there. But there was no adult. And then something happened. You could see the other 4 cubs reacted to something we couldn't hear. And then they got up, and there was a long log that went into the woods, and all 4 of them in a row, off they went to wherever their mother was. But this one pup was just too interested, and not, imagine that, not paying attention to mom and just getting closer to us. And then even that one you could tell there's that signal, and finally, reluctantly sort of turned and went right along the log and followed with the rest. And of course, okay, one more. This is my favorite story from the whole time, and then I better stop. So another Wednesday, it's quiet. In fact, if you ride a bike or you want to walk, my wife doesn't ride, she would walk. Wednesdays at Cades Cove in the summer are great because it's just quiet, and I think that makes a difference in terms of what's going on with the animals. So I'm paddling along, and there's a whole group of bikers, and they're all stuck on the road, and I'm like, okay, bear sighting. And I stop, and not very far ahead of us is a mother bear, and she's teaching her 3 cubs how to dig down at roots. We don't know quite what she was going after. It could have been termites at the base of the tree or what. We weren't sure. And finally, we just pressed in a little too close. And so she did what mother bears, I've learned, do. She just got up and very casually began to move in our direction. Not with a threat, but just to let you know, I'm here. And so I think she knew we're backing up, and she's paying attention to us, and we're backing up. Well, then on the other side of the meadow, in come 3 bucks, and I counted the so cool. And they come in, and something about that, the bear, they were heading towards where the cubs were. The bear didn't like it, and so she turned abruptly and rushed them. And it was just priceless. The cool guys suddenly went, "Ugh!" And they just turned around and just got out of their white tails wagging all the way. And I thought it was hilarious. And there was a guy from Australia next to me, and he just said, kind of whispered to me, he goes, "This is exactly what we come here for." And it was. He, though, had a device and recorded the whole thing, and I didn't have anything, so I lost that one. But anyway, thanks. That's a good question. Well, thank you so much. You've been a great audience. I really appreciate it. And then, if any of you are interested, the essays and more are in this copy from Smokies Life. You're welcome to come up and get one if you want.
This was the storyteller that won the experience to come into Cades Cove for 6 weeks. So
Well, we'll do the best
he
I
got
can.
to stay here.
Any Buddha novel
Yes, and he wrote a novel about it, which he doesn't have published yet. He's still working on it. But we thought, since God is a storyteller and we love the animals and stuff, we would find it interesting to hear him come in here and speak. Thank you all for watching. We love you. Jesus loves you more.
Brian Railsback.
Brian Railsback.
Railsback.
That's one of those funny backpacks, isn't it?
Yeah.